You're listening to A Radio.
Real concern that Canadian
so we got
households
the
do
R
not
word.
have
The R word will be on the minds of economists.
the wherewithal.
The recent yield curve inversion has renewed speculation about a North American recession. Indicators suggest that the next recession may hit Canadians harder than Americans.
Canada's household savings rate falling to 1.1%.
We're at the very end of a long-run trade war with China is the harbinger of doom.
This new report that's come out with thousands of job losses additionally expected.
We're headed towards a recession or a bear market that will be accompanied by a recession. You know, this has been a long,
expanding at the annualized pace of 0.4% in the fourth quarter.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. For this podcast, I'm going to read to you two pieces to do with the Canadian economy. They're from CTV News website. You can see them there. Here are those pieces. The first piece is headed, Annual Pace of Inflation Rose in May to 2.4%, according to statisticians for the Canadian government. They don't call it that, but they bastardise English because they're French, so I call it what it is. And this piece was published in June, and then I'm going to read a piece that was published a little later. Here's the first piece. Ottawa. The annual pace of inflation picked up in May as the Consumer Price Index rose to 2.4% compared with a year ago. It's the largest increase since October last year. The move compared with the 2% increase in April and was the fourth straight month of rising year-on-year increases. Economists had expected an increase of 2.1%, according to Thomson Reuters. TD Bank senior economist James Marple said inflation is back in Canada, at least for now. While some factors pushing up price growth are likely to prove fleeting, we can't discount the relatively broad-based nature of price growth in May, Marple wrote in a brief report. The Canadian economy continues to recover from its soft patch at the start of the year. That's code for recession, but they don't want to use the word because that would screw up Trudeau. With increasing signs of improving domestic demand, which is BS by the way, that should push growth above its potential rate over the remainder of this year. According to the official statistics from the Canadian government, said that prices rose in all 8 major components of the index compared with a year ago. Food prices rose 3.5%, which is BS also. Fresh vegetable prices increased 16.7%, the largest year-on-year increase since February 2016. Just a little note, I personally have noted that food prices have risen since last year at least 20%. And further to that, this is going to be covered in a future podcast, the prices they're paying in the UK compared with Canada and the US is unbelievable. It's a third of what we're paying in Canada, a third. Anyway, transportation prices gained 3.1% as the cost of air transportation added 8.9% and the cost of passenger vehicles rose 4.2%. Passenger vehicle insurance premiums rose 8.1%. I just have to interject there. Passenger vehicles rose 4.2% because passenger vehicles in Canada are valued in US dollars, not Canadian dollars. And if the Canadian dollar is dropping in value, the cost of a vehicle goes up in Canada. They never put that in, do they? They never tell the truth. Any of them. Aggravates the hell out of me. However, drivers paid 3.7% less for gasoline compared with a year ago. Yet, thanks to Donald Trump, no thanks to Trudeau, excluding gasoline, the consumer price index increased 2.7%. You can't exclude gasoline. How ridiculous. Ugh. In April, the year-on-year increase was 2.3%. The price rises put inflation ahead of the Bank of Canada's ideal target of 2%. No kidding. The Bank of Canada, which adjusts its key interest rates to keep inflation in check, has kept the rate at 1.75% since October last year amid economic weakness. That's code for recession at the end of 2018 and at the start of this year. Make no mistake, Canadians, Canada is in a recession. They just don't want to use the word. The central bank has been predicting the economy will pick up this year. However, there's been mixed opinions among economists about what the Bank of Canada will do with its policy interest rate. Many economists expect the US Federal Reserve to cut interest rates later this year. Well, I think they did, didn't they? The Canadian Government Statistics Report said that the average of its 3 gauges for core inflation, which are considered a better measure of underlying price pressures because they omit volatile items like gasoline, rose 2.07% compared with 1.9%. Again, I urge you to talk English. You cannot remove a staple product needed for every Canadian. Gasoline is essential. It's not a volatile product. It's a product you need. We don't all drive electric roller skates, do we? The pickup in underlying inflation, which continues to trend around 2% target, highlights the Bank of Canada is facing quite a different policy picture than the Fed, said Benjamin Wrightis, Canadian rates and macro strategist at BMO Capital Markets. Wrightis said the inflation report is the one more reason for the Bank of Canada to remain patient and resist the temptation to follow the parade of global central bankers sounding more dovish. The second piece I'm going to read to you was actually published in August of this year. Inflation hits Bank of Canada 2% target for the second straight month. Ottawa. In Canadian, annual inflation came in at 2% in July and hit the Bank of Canada's ideal target for the second straight month, compared with earlier in the year. Consumers paid less last month for gasoline. Yeah, no thanks to Trudeau, by the way. Internet services and travel accommodation, according to the statistics from the Canadian government, said Wednesday prices showed strength in other areas, including an 18.9% increase in the cost of fresh vegetables compared with a year ago. Think about that. And as I said earlier, our food in Canada, in my mind, has gone up approximately 20%. Why is that our food goes up when the cost of food in the UK hardly moves at all? Very strange, isn't it? The Consumer Price Index also found higher costs year on year for auto insurance, mortgage interest and passenger vehicles. There you go again, just as I was saying again, because passenger vehicles are valued in Canada in US dollars. Auto insurance has probably also got a link to the US and therefore is being valued in US dollars. I don't know why mortgage interest should go up. Somebody can probably explain that to me. Anyway, the article continues. The average of Canada's 3 gauges for core inflation, which are considered better measures of underlying price pressures by excluding volatile items, was also close to the central bank's target of 2.3%. That's 2.03%. it was slightly up from the revised reading of 2% in June. On their own, the headline and core numbers don't put immediate pressure on inflation targeting Bank of Canada to adjust interest rates. The central bank can move the interest rate as a tool to try and promote or cool off inflation. But with weakening global economic conditions related to US-China trade war, some economists now expect Governor Stephen Poloz to cut interest rates this fall, and perhaps as early as September. The Canadian economy has continued to perform well, despite concerns about the global outlook. A closer look at the inflation for July shows gas prices had less of a year-over-year fall than previous months' reports. The smaller drop applied more upward pressure to the headline number as consumers paid more for gas in July compared with June. But by omitting pump prices, let's omit pump prices. Why don't you omit food prices? Why don't you omit house prices? Why don't you omit all taxes? How ridiculous. The agency said overall inflation was 2.4%. Baloney. Total baloney. The report said increased in all 8 of its major categories compared with a year earlier. However, the annual price pressures in the services index slowed last month to 2.4%, down from 2.8%. By region, consumer prices slowed the most in Manitoba and British Columbia, the report said. The Government of Canada attributed the deceleration in Manitoba to the July 1 drop in the province's retail sales tax. There you go. Lower the taxes, increase the profits. Simple, isn't it? But not to communists. On a month-to-month basis, the agency said consumers paid 2.5% less for telephone services in July compared with June. I don't think telephone prices in Canada go down. That's garbage. The only way our prices go down is if we try and shop around. And it's very difficult to shop around when there's a monopoly, isn't it? Oh, and here they are. They're going to quote some stuff here, which is also baloney, by the way. The drop followed pricing changes across the industry as wireless companies faced tougher competition. Really? Do you really expect us to believe that? The agency said the decrease in phone plan costs was offset somewhat by higher price tags on devices like smartphones and tablets. From June to July, the price of these devices rose 42.5%. Wow. Why do you think those prices went up? Because if the plans go down, where do you think they're going to get the money from? Oh, my God, these people are so dumb. The agency also released rates for major cities, but cautioned that the figures may have fluctuated wildly because they are based on a smaller statistical model. Well, there are numbers if you want to read them. They'll be on the website. I will put links to them. But basically, you can tell what I think about that. It's utter baloney. Canada doesn't have competition in the wireless cell phone market, by the way. There's nothing there at all. Food prices are also controlled by a monopoly. There is no independent shopping available for Canadian consumers. They all are part of the same group. And that, I think, even includes Walmart, because they're selling the same stuff in Walmart as they sell in all the other, quote, Canadian food stores, unquote. The only time Canadians can get a break is if they're brave enough to cross the border and go and get some food that isn't taxed to the hilt. But of course, you can only bring a certain amount back because of the federal Liberal communists, and also the devaluing of the Canadian dollar makes it also somewhat prohibitive. And do you think that's by accident? I don't. They have a captive audience in Canada. And as far as the automobiles are concerned, they're trying to price people out of larger cars. because they don't want them driving. They want them driving electric roller skates instead. Anyway, that's by the by. The point is that there is a recession in Canada, despite these experts who don't know the way out of a paper bag. There is a recession in Canada, and there is inflation in Canada, and the Canadian inflation is way higher than 2.4%, let me tell you. It's about 10% here. And if you think people are getting pay rises, think on. They're not. So not only is the Canadian dollar dropping in value, courtesy of 57 Genders Trudeau, inflation is eating away at the value of their currency, and also we're paying more for basic staples. So we're being hit in all areas. The only good thing for us, well, certainly in Ontario, is that we have a Conservative government who has put a cap on electricity prices, stopping them going up, which Win was pushing them up 25%, making it impossible for people to have lights on and keep warm or keep cool. Thank God for Doug Ford. But if you listen to our Catherine McKenna, he's the devil incarnate. I would say pot calling kettle black. And when Canadians come to vote, maybe they'll consider this as a measure of success or otherwise. For some reason, they can't see the signs of recession. Could it be they don't want to? Canada is in a unique situation, one that doesn't happen very often. Canada has signs of not only a recession, which has hit very unevenly across Canada. There are parts of Canada doing very well indeed, thank you very much. But at the same time, Canada as a whole is suffering from unwelcome inflation. So people who are in recession are also having to deal with inflation. Now, this is my opinion, and I'm pretty sure, that I'm not alone in this thought. Due mainly, I believe, to obscene tax increases forced upon Canadians by 57 Genders Trudeau. This, in my mind, is an illegal carbon dioxide tax, to which I think is nothing more and nothing less than a tax on human beings breathing, considering that's the gas that we all exhale to live. Their insane view on oil, even though they keep importing oil from the Middle East, they keep saying we must remove ourselves for the need for oil, which statement alone is ridiculous. The federal Liberal Communists in Canada's approach to Canada's economy creates a world view, not the nutball countries living off windmills, but the real world, that Canada has indeed lost its way. The simple upshot of this is the lack of confidence, coupled with the massive irresponsible spending of Liberals, plunging Canada into ever deeper federal deficit, with no change in policy in sight, forcing Canada and Canadians to borrow more and more to pay for it, and to pay for those outlandish policies, while all the while gutting the heart of our own energy economy. This forces, unfortunately, foreign investors to be wary of the Canadian dollar, which has the effect of devaluing our currency, causing our imports to cost us more. Hence, we have inflation at the same time as we have a potential recession. Whilst in stark contrast, south of the border, Canadian businesses and consumers alike look with envious eyes how in such a short time period that one man with a vision for his country has turned the failed and disastrous policies of two previous administrations, i.e. Obama, into unrivaled success in their economy, whilst at the same time able to maintain low interest levels and low inflation. Like him or hate him, I for one like him, you can't but admire him and what he has achieved. And to that matter, you can't but wonder what America would be like today if he hadn't won in 2016. I'm in no doubt that the federal Liberal Communists here in Canada would have linked up with our colleagues in America and around the world. They would have taken the whole world down a disastrous path Canada alone is at present following, leading us all, rather than just Canada, to doom, gloom, poverty and despair. Thank God America took that course. It didn't stop the damage that's occurring in Canada. It's not their responsibility, it's ours. But it did slow it down, and maybe that's enough to give us a chance to change course. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio, EHRADIO, A-Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern, and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.